All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the monthly meeting of the Boston Region Metropolitan Planning Organization's Community Advisory Council. I'm Sean Rourke. I'm the manager of communications and engagement at the Boston Region MPO. We have a really exciting meeting planned that includes some time for members to discuss what their organizations are working on. And later we'll have a presentation from um, a project manager on the MPO staff about a multimodal study that the MPO recently completed, looking at the connections and gaps between the MBTA system and the region's Blue Bikes network. Before we get started, though, I'm going to hand it over to Gia, the MPO's public engagement coordinator, to read some notices and do the attendance roll call for the meeting.
Thank you, Sean, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gia Hong, and I'm the Public Engagement Coordinator at the Boston Region MPO. I'll take us through a couple of notices. First, I'll read our Notice of Non-Discrimination. You are invited to participate in our transportation planning process, regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status or background. You can read the full notice of your rights and protections at www.boston.org/MPO_non-discrimination. Next slide, please. Our accessibility statement is, this meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, or if you have any technical difficulties, please contact me, Gia Hong, MPO staff at jhung@ctps.org or 857-702-3654 or via the chat box. Next slide, please. I'll take us through our guidelines. All participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. Participants may mute and unmute themselves. Always remain muted unless actively speaking. To participate in the discussion, please select the raise hand function. You can find this by clicking either on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and a window will pop up with a raise hand button at the bottom, or the reactions button in the toolbar. The chair will then call on participants. Please raise your hand via Zoom if you would like to use an AI note taker during this meeting. If you are on the phone, you can use the *9 button to raise your hand. Next slide, please. And with that, I'll walk us through our introductions and roll call. We're going to do this in alphabetical order. So first up, we have 495 Metro West Partnership.
Present.
Thank you. Next, we have A Better City.
Hi, this is Scott Mullen here, and Amir Wilson also joining from separate locations.
Thank you. Welcome. Abundant Housing, Massachusetts.
Hi, this is Jesse Canson Benanav. I'm here.
Thank you. Bike to the Sea.
Hi, this is Jonah. I'm here with Bike to the Sea.
City of Chelsea.
Hi, this is Sarah, present.
Welcome. Thank you. Codman Square Neighborhood Development Corporation.
Hi, this is Jacinda, present.
Welcome. Conservation Law Foundation.
Hi, this is Paulina Muratori representing Conservation Law Foundation.
Thank you. Livable Streets Alliance.
Hi, this is Maha. I'm here representing Livable Streets.
Massachusetts Healthy Aging Collaborative. Moving on, we have MassBike.
Hey, this is Galen Mook, and also Alexis Hosea Abbott is here.
Welcome, please. Mystic River Watershed Association.
Hi, Carl Alexander, Mystic River Watershed Association.
Mystic Valley Elder Services.
Hi, this is Meg Von Lassiter from Mystic Valley, and Sheila is also joining the call.
Welcome both. Prevention Research Center on Nutrition and Physical Health, Carter Teach Chan School of Public Health.
Hi, this is Angie Kradnick from the PRC.
Transportation for Massachusetts.
Pete Wilson from D for Mass.
Town Green. Town of Natick.
Morgan Griffiths here from Town of Natick.
Welcome. Transit Matters.
Caitlin Allen Conley from Transit Matters. I'm here with Will Palmer as well from Transit Matters.
Watertown TMA.
Sophia Gallimore, Watertown TMA, present.
Welcome. Awesome, thank you all. And I will hand it back to Sean to take us through this meeting.
Thanks, Gia. First, according to the guideline related to AI note takers, I see that an AI note taker has already been added to the meeting. Can the person who came with the read.ai note taker please raise their hand? Just want to make sure it's like actually connected to somebody. Okay, so it might be attending the meeting on somebody's behalf automatically. Does anyone object to the presence of the AI note taker? Okay, I think it's fine. Oh, Will. Yeah, Will. Mine, it's Will just chatted me, letting me know it says Greg added it. And I checked to see if there was anyone named Greg in the meeting, but there isn't currently. So yeah, I think it's if no one objects, I think it's fine to leave it, since the meeting will be is recorded and will be public anyway. Okay. So next, the next item on the agenda is the chair's report, which will be delivered by Caitlin Allen Connolly, who is the representative for Transit Matters, which serves as the chair of the advisory council. Caitlin?
Great, thank you so much. I am going to put my timer on to stay to my 5 minutes. So give me 1 second. So Carl, Will, and I have worked together to cover the last 2 MPO board meetings, and there were several important developments regarding project funding, policy, and community engagement that I would like to share as part of the report. The first is regarding the development of the Next Transportation Improvement Program, otherwise known as TIP. The MPO, I think, as you all know, is developing its 2027 to 2031 TIP, and project applications are being accepted in the fall, and then they'll be reviewed in the winter. And it's my understanding that this group can help inform that process via the TIP Readiness Committee. Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, please. And that there'll be TIP hours that will be held by Ethan and Adriana that our group members are welcome to attend. Is that correct, Sean?
That's correct.
Awesome. The second is regarding the TIP policy focus on project delivery. This was a big topic, was really holding projects accountable. The board adopted a project rescoring policy that targets stalled projects that have been on the TIP for years. And they think this is really critical as a really critical development because it creates space for new ready to go or shovel ready projects. And then regarding sort of new readiness guidelines, the staff has also introduced, as it relates to this, draft guidelines to improve project readiness. The goal is to enforce a 25% design requirement and to prevent projects from sitting idle. These guidelines include a minimum design requirement, regular cost updates, and staff evaluations of risk. The guidelines will be discussed further on November 6th and developed by December. So there'll be more to come on this front, perhaps in the next chair's report. The second point I wanted to report back to the group on is related to community engagement. And this is definitely an area where this group can play an active role. The staff reported that the MPO is actively working to improve how it gathers input from historically excluded communities, including youth, low-income populations, and people of color. They now have an engagement dashboard, and I'm sure we can share that link, that highlights key themes like safety and access and connectivity. Perhaps our group could offer to collaborate with the MPO engagement staff to see how the group can help reach these populations for the next long-range transportation plan cycle. The third point I wanted to raise is related to Vision Zero. This was also brought up, and we heard about the public feedback received from Vision Zero, and the MPO is creating a dashboard aimed primarily at municipal staff to help them easily understand crash patterns, identify dangerous locations, and apply best practices. And then the last point I wanted to raise that was covered in these meetings is related to research. And there is a study on blue bikes, which we will hear about later on in this meeting. And there is also a study on low carbon freight networks, which is offering resources to cities on the design, enforcement, and policy for operator safety. So that basically covers what we heard at the last couple of meetings. There are some events and staffing updates I can share with you. The annual meeting is on November 13th at 1 p.m. This is when the vice chair will be elected and other MPO elections will take place. And there also have been some staffing changes. The executive director reported on some staff departures, resignations, and retirements across key teams, which could impact MPO bandwidth moving forward, but we have a truly great staff supporting this group and the processes. So that is the end of my chair report, and I just want to thank Carl and Will for their assistance in covering these meetings, and Sean and Gia and the rest of the MPO staff for being such great support. Thank you.
Thank you, Caitlin. Next, we will move on to the next agenda item, which is public comments. If there are any members of the public who would like to make a comment at this time, please raise your hand. Okay, seeing no hands raised. If you're a member of the public and you have a question or a comment during the meeting, please raise your hand and we will try to call on you. As always, advisory council members are welcome to raise your hands at any time to participate in the discussion and ask questions of the presenters. Next slide, please. So next, we will move on to the approval of the September 4th, 2025 Advisory Council meeting minutes. First, does any member of the Advisory Council have any comments, questions, or corrections that they would like made to the minutes? Okay, seeing none. Can we please get a motion to approve the September minutes?
So moved.
Thank you, Scott. And can we get a second?
Second, Jason Palic.
Thank you, Jason. Right, the motion having been made and seconded, I will now take the roll call on the approval of the minutes. So once again, in alphabetical order by the organization name, 495 Metro West Partnership.
Aye.
Thank you. A Better City.
Aye.
Abundant Housing.
Aye.
Bike to the Sea.
Yes.
City of Chelsea.
Aye.
Codman Square Neighborhood Development.
Aye.
Conservation Law Foundation.
Aye.
Livable Streets,
Aye.
Healthy Aging Collaborative, excuse me. Okay, Mass Bike,
Yes.
Mystic River Watershed Association,
Yes.
Mystic Valley Elder Services,
Yes.
I'm going to shorten this to Harvard T.C. Chan School of Public Health.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. T for MA, T for MA. I don't hear Pete, but I heard like static from his channel. We can come back to T for MA. Town Green, did I just lose my audio or? No, okay. Transit Matters,
Yes.
thank you. Watertown TMA,
Aye.
thank you. And then just want to come back to T4 MA.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
All
Pete.
right, cool.
All right, the motion carries. All right, next we are moving on to a new, oh, sorry, Caitlin, go ahead.
Yes, I'm so sorry. I just wanted to mention that Carl and I will be sharing a chairperson's memo and report that provides an overview of the meetings with the key points. And we weren't finished with it in time for the regular to adhere to the policies and processes of the MPO. But when it's complete, it will be put in a shared folder for members and then distributed. So you can have the oral update and you'll also be able to review and go back to an update in a written form. So I'm so sorry I forgot to say that. And thank you so much to Carl for creating the template.
Thank you, Caitlin. Yeah, I think that's a great idea because there's a lot more than than can possibly be covered in the chair's report. So I think that's a great like expanded form of the chair's report. So now we're moving on to a new type of agenda item that's an activity to create space for advisory council members to share more about what their organizations are working on and create connections with each other. So we have asked, I think this meeting, 4 members to respond to the following prompt. Megan, could you advance to the next slide? Thank you. The prompt being, what is one project or initiative your organization is working on or recently completed that you'd like to share with the group for awareness, different perspectives, or general discussion? And so no one's being put on the spot. Before the meeting, we reached out to 495 Metro West Partnership, Mass Bike, Watertown TMA, and the town of Natick to provide a response to this prompt. And we've asked each of them to spend about 5 minutes sharing a project or initiative like the prompt says, and then there'll also be time for discussion and questions after each one. So let's just take it from the top here. And Jason, do you want to go first for 495 Metro West Partnership?
Sure. I will start by admitting that I completely missed that there was a more specific prompt in your email, which is no fault of your own. I read it too quickly and thought I had internalized it and didn't. My plan is to just very briefly give folks an introduction to the partnership as well as what our transportation priorities are, so folks have a clear sense of who we are and what we work on in the transportation sphere, if that's all right.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Excellent. So thanks everybody for the time. My name is Jason Palich. I am the Executive Director of the 495 Metro West Partnership. We are a regional economic development organization serving 36 cities and towns in the 495 Metro West region. I will try to throw a link into the chat so everyone can see our service area in a second. But if you imagine a large diamond to the west of Boston, we go roughly from Westford all the way down to Foxborough. as far east as Natick and Wayland, as far west as Shrewsbury and Grafton. We are about 1/10 of the state's population, punching above our weight class a little bit in terms of economic impact, as opposed to being specifically a business interest group, which is what commonly 501c6 economic development organizations are thought of being. And I just put the service area map into the chat for anyone who's interested. We are a stakeholder alliance. We are an alliance of our region's businesses, municipal governments, chambers of commerce, regional transit authorities, higher education institutions, river watershed organizations, developers, state legislators, and others. Folks who don't always see eye to eye on everything, but who are around our table where the common interest is 495 Metro West. We are a relatively small organization. It is myself and one full-time employee for all this work. But we try to represent the region's interests on a few issues that are holistically necessary to support economic growth. So in addition to some traditional economic development activities, we try to advocate for the region's needs on a few key areas. Chief among them are transportation, housing, water resources, including water and sewer capacity, and workforce development. And transportation advocacy has always been very central to what we do. Just a quick pause to tell you a little bit about the region, and some of you are familiar with it, but for those who are not, 495 Metro West is a major employer hub in the state. It is also a region that has experienced substantial growth over the last 2 generations. Between 1970 and 2020, the state's population grew by about 24%, but our region's population grew by 49%. The region has always historically been a net importer of labor. It's a life sciences hub for biopharmaceuticals, for medical devices as well. But it is also a predominantly suburban region, which has created a number of transportation challenges, which is part of what brings me to you here this afternoon. When our organization engages in transportation advocacy, we break our transportation work into 3 buckets: roadways, commuter rail, and regional transit authority service. None of our 36 cities and towns are served by MBTA bus or subway service. And weaved throughout our roadway, commuter rail, and RTA service is the desire for more connectivity through trails and walkability options between those 3 modes of transit. For roadways, we engage in advocacy to make sure that there's the needed investment to make sure our roadways are safe for commuters, as well as for economic activity. For those who have been through our area, you may be familiar with the effort to replace the Massachusetts Turnpike interchange with 495. That construction is underway. That's slated to finish up in 2027. We were one of the chief advocates for Mass DOT to take on that work over the course of the years. When it comes to regional transit authorities, our region is served by 5 different RTAs, which historically had not had much connectivity between them. So in addition to advocating for strong, robust RTA service, we also push very strongly for innovative connections between service areas to try to help folks commute throughout the region. Our region is also served by 3 MBTA commuter rail lines. So the Framingham-Worcester line, which cuts right through the heart of our service area towards the center, the Fitchburg line to the north, and the Franklin line to the south. So we are big advocates for robust commuter rail service, all-day clock face scheduling, investments in signals and switching, and improvements along the line, and so forth. And just to sort of give you a sense of what our priorities are as we engage in the transportation advocacy space, again, being a predominantly suburban region, but one that's bringing a substantial number of workers into the region, both from points west and east. Difficulties getting around our service area are our focus. We advocate, again, for improved connectivity, not just between our RTA service areas, but between modes of transit as well. So that is just very briefly who we are and what we do and what brings us into this space. And happy to, I don't know if you were doing a Q&A part of this, but happy to answer questions if folks might have any.
Thank you, Jason. Does anyone have any questions for Jason about the 495 Metro West partnership, or perhaps the perspective that the organization's bringing? I believe that the 495 Metro West partnership, while there are businesses that are members of some of the other members' coalitions, I believe that the 495 Metro West partnership is the only primarily business focused organization. So I think that's interesting, but I would like to hear from other members what questions you have for Jason or what you'd like him to expand on. Galen?
Hey, Jason, this is Galen from MassPike. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but what are 1 or 2 goals, like targets that you might love to see that would incentivize mode shift in terms of getting your employees to their employers in the region?
How ambitious can I be?
Go dream big.
Here's a big one. A big one is commuter rail pricing. So because a lot of our communities are in the zone 7 and 8 on the commuter rail, we have communities where the all-in cost of taking a commuter rail in and out of Boston. So when you take into consideration the ticket price plus the parking, we have folks for whom, if they have access to either a parking space or a less expensive than typical parking space, or even just one of the market rate garages, we have folks for whom the commuter rail ride in and out is actually not cheaper or not substantially cheaper than the cost of driving. So, right off the bat, wanting the public transit option to be more affordable than taking a single occupancy vehicle in and out of the city is a consistent concern for us. I would also say more demand response service in our service area. So because we are both a region that has a lot of large employers, but also a predominantly suburban region, we don't have commuting patterns that are quite as easy to predict with fixed route service. And so where we have seen some of our RTAs try to operate, for example, smaller shuttles on fixed routes, there's been less success than demand response services have shown. So I would say, just sort of two right off the bat, pricing on commuter rail, wanting it actually to be the more financially advantageous option to take the commuter rail, but wanting folks to get from non-traditional point A's to point B's in our service area through transit. Neither of which is a small ask.
If I could jump in, Amir from A Better City, when you talk about like those commute patterns for like non-traditional patterns, have you been able to see, where employees are typically going within your region? Obviously, you're gonna get some people like commuting to Boston, perhaps. But for the folks who are commuting within the 495 region, are there a couple hubs there that are of interest?
The frustrating answer to that is not really. So certainly we do have some municipalities that host more jobs than others. So what spring to mind, Framingham, Natick, Marlborough, Hopkinton. But for each of our cities and towns every year, we actually, through census data, we break down for each of our 36 cities and towns, the top 5 destinations that workers commute to, the top 5 destinations that workers commute from. When you take Boston and to a lesser extent Worcester out of the equation, there's no heavy hitting winner. Again, you'll have your Framinghams, your Marlboroughs, your Hopkintons sort of near the top of the list for everybody sort of clustered near the center of our service area. But it's not as if, and that sort of gets to the heart of our commuting challenge. There is not one big destination in our predominantly suburban region that people are going to.
Great. Thank you, Jason. All right, let's move on now to Mass Bike.
All right, thanks. Yeah, I'll take this one. I also have Alexis here, who is our advocacy specialist, so happy to have her jump in if any Q&A. But my name is Galen Mook. I'm the executive director here at Mass Bike. We're the Massachusetts Bicycle Coalition. We're a statewide advocacy organization, a 501c3, been around since 1977. Been a nonprofit since 1980 and has grown as pretty much the only statewide bicycling advocacy org. But because we work in a coalition, we always depend on local advocates that represent a variety of modes and a variety of needs. So we try to keep kind of a higher strata picture in our advocacy to help the local advocates get their work done. This means focusing on legislation, policy, funding mechanisms, and kind of the broader needle moving stuff, which is why we're very happy to be participating in this MPO process, because I think that's also a very big picture. But we also like to kind of pinch from the old Tip O'Neill quote, where it's used to say that all politics is local, to go with all biking is local. So my goal is to kind of take the local needs and provide resources to local organizations and local resources to help get stuff done. We do a variety of work, big to small. We do think legislatively, but we also help people pump their own tires. And we work in the E's of advocacy, which include education, enforcement, evaluation, engineering, and encouragement. Variety of different offerings throughout the year. We are kind of a seasonal push as well. Right now, we're in our education work with our Safe Routes to Schools programs. We are coming up on our World Day of Remembrance push, which is a statewide effort for people to remember those who were killed in traffic crashes throughout the state. And in May, we host Bike Month, which is kind of our encouragement to get people to celebrate biking with bike to work breakfasts, workshops, etc. So we do a pretty wide gamut of support for biking, kind of all things biking. Specifically for today, though, I want to bring up just like two very specific points that arguably when I was invited to present with 3 to 5 minutes, I said, well, what else do I have on my meetings today? One is around micromobility. So MassBike is participating in a micromobility commission, which was legislatively called out but hosted by the DOT to try to figure out all the nuances and then some to micromobility, including e-bikes, scooters, skateboards, etc., with the goal of both building sensible regulations where none exist, but also to incentivize their use. So one of the questions we're asking this commission is, what does it look like when we have 10 times the amount of micromobility users on our pathways, or 100 times the amount of micromobility users trying to get to and from work on the roads? So to really kind of think holistically of where micromobility fits in. The other thing I'll mention is that coming up in November, which is actually this week, in a week and a half, we're going to be hosting the World Day of Remembrance. Actually, I realized I could share a screen. Sean, is it okay if I share my screen for a second?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, cool. I'll just do a quick request here. Maybe as opposed to just talking, I will also show. Let me know if you can see this. Maybe I'll start at the top here. Do you see a classification framework?
Yes.
Cool. So I'll start at the very top. This is a yet to be public, but draft recommendations. I mean, it is public, but yet to be finalized draft recommendations from the Micromobility Commission. So I'll keep on this topic for a second. This is in talks now. So if anybody's interested in participating, let's get in touch with me and I can help us get in touch with the DOT. But a couple of things we are looking at, sorry to scroll so much. We're looking at a schema of categories for all sorts of different micromobility, including tier 0, which is lower speed, tier 1, which is medium speed, and even tier 2, which is quite faster speeds, to really kind of drive at where regulatory standards could get to, again, build a structure for having these actually integrate in with our transportation system, all the way up to powered motorcycles that might be electric. And then we're trying to figure out operational requirements. Are they allowed on pathways? Do they need registration? Do they need a helmet, et cetera, et cetera? Now, again, these are all draft, so I'm kind of giving you a little bit of a sneak peek, but this is part of the work that we're doing right now of, again, trying to figure out a framework where none exists. And why this is going to pertain to the MPO, because I feel that eventually once we have these criteria and these regulations and these incentives, I certainly believe that these will make their way into engineering requirements and recommendations, into funding streams about bike share, et cetera. So this is something to pay attention to because I see this as the emerging transportation needs that we're going to be figuring out collectively, which is why it's great to be bringing this to the MPO community conversation here, since you all represent so many different facets of this beautiful gem of the future of transportation. The next thing I'll mention here is our World Day of Remembrance. This is back into the E's. This is kind of an encouragement E in our advocacy, but again, this is focusing on the somber nature of the work that we do. Getting back to Sean's mention of the Vision Zero work and the crash portals and all the rest. This is MassBike working in collaboration with our Vision Zero coalition partners, including Walk Massachusetts, Transportation for Massachusetts, Transit Matters, Boston Cyclists Union, and a whole cadre of others. Safe Roads Alliance, even partners at the Massachusetts Traffic Safety Committee will really kind of help remember those who were lost to traffic crashes. And this kind of brings down the human aspect of what we do. So though I was mentioning that we work kind of on a 35,000-foot view, thinking very strategically around the big processes that allow our work to happen, let's not forget that we are actually talking about humans, people, brothers, sisters, parents, family members, loved ones who were lost, we feel, completely needlessly to traffic violence. And I think if we all adhere to the concept of Vision Zero, though we're far from it, I think if we can all agree that we should build a transportation system where literally no one has to die, then we are reframing how we are building our infrastructure, how we're creating our programs, and how we're really incentivizing the culture of sharing our traffic space. This is just two of the multitude of things that are going on in my schedule each day. So I just wanted to share these very briefly, but I'm happy to pause here and obviously take some comments, not just today, but you can always reach us. And I'll throw our website in the chat too. So yeah, maybe Maha, feel free to jump right in. Oh, also one of our partners on this is Livable Streets Alliance, of course.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we could have had this conversation any other day, but since we're talking about it here, I guess I just recently read a report about like speed limits. I think it was like a report from New York City, and I think one of the stories that I was reading was, I know some of these, especially like considering like because Livable Streets does some greenways work, and I know like greenways can be a way of like going further out, like longer distances, like especially like mass trails, and like there's like a whole world where you can micromobility can be a way of like going further distances. But then like we have blue bike systems which charge you by like the hour or minute or whatever. So one of the stories that I was reading was someone who uses blue bikes and said because of the speed limit, the pricing has not come down. Like they increased the bike sharing prices, I guess, in New York recently. But now because the speed limit is less, it's becoming more expensive for people who use bike share. So I was wondering if you have thoughts on that, if there is like something, is that a consideration? Like if you're in a greenway, even though like for instance, like speed in Center City is different than those bigger mass trails or greenways, or is it across like one mode should have this speed regardless of where they are? Like just wondering if you have thoughts.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that's tackled in a couple of ways with this commission right now. One is, are we suggesting, and all the recommendations have yet to be released, and I should mention that they are due to be released at the end of January, so please stay tuned. I think this is a multi-answer for you. The first is for speeds. I think speed also depends on context. So speed on a pathway is different than speed on a roadway, and not all pathways are the same. Southwest Corridor is different than the Esplanade Trail, is different than the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. So I think that there may be, through this commission, a statewide recommendation for pathway speeds holistically, just like we may allow municipalities statewide to set 20 or 25-mile-an-hour speed limits, regardless of the road, unless otherwise posted. That may be one of the recommendations. But I also think that a lot of it is down to the jurisdictions. So for instance, the Minuteman pathway is kind of managed by 3 different townships, Arlington, Lexington, and Bedford, and they agree as part of a tri-town bikeway committee of what speed limits may or may not be set on the bikeway. They are legally allowed to set speed limits. MassBike did lobby and support legislation that allows official speed limits to be on pathways now that we're seeing some faster speeds. But I think the decision by the commission is out as to whether or not we're going to actually have a blanket speed limit on pathways versus roadways. But I think to your second point of the device itself having speeds, what we are going to look at in terms of the tiered structure of how we're going to classify these is going to be based off top speed. So the goal of like 0 to 20 miles an hour, which is currently the e-bikes that we have now, then there may be a tier of a 21 to 30 mile an hour, which would be class 3 e-bikes and maybe the skateboards, etc. Then there may be a tier 4 of a class of a 31 to 40 miles an hour, which might be only allowed on roadways. So I think what you're going to see there is as opposed to playing whack-a-mole device by device, they might actually come out with a recommendation of doing it by maximum top speed, even though that's a little bit different than the users, because of course, somebody on a faster e-bike may be able to go slower. And then I think to the third point of your question for pricing, it's different than in New York City, where at least in the Blue Bike system, for those unfamiliar, it's the management and ownership is done by the municipalities collectively, and the operator is beheld to the choices that are decided by the municipalities. So if cost is the concern, Motivate, who operates the Blue Bike system, is not necessarily the target in order to bring down costs. It would be the municipalities, which we've seen in the city of Boston at least, and others, where they'll subsidize the cost either per minute in order to make it a lower cost, or for lower income folks, they might subsidize the membership cost. So there's a variety of ways of making equity kind of an E, back to the advocacy E's, making it a lens with which we're viewing the pricing structure. And yes, micromobility and scooter share and bike share and the public nature of it is being talked about in the commission. So if you have some thoughts, I'm happy to get you in touch with those of the DOT who might be interested in hearing your thoughts on that. But one of the recommendations that I'm supporting, at least, is that there should be some state dollars that go in to help subsidize the expansion and use of micromobility share, as long as there's a public good attached to it. Hopefully that helped. I know that was a lot of answer to throw
No,
back
thank you. I asked too many questions, but thank you so much. This is helpful.
Thank you, Galen. That was really interesting. In the interest of time, I do want to move on to Watertown TMA, but it sounds like there is a lot of interest in the commission that Galen's serving on, and so we can absolutely bring this back as like a full agenda item if people would like to discuss it further. All right, Watertown TMA.
Okay, so I guess I was taking a little different approach. The Watertown TMA is TMA for Watertown, and we have about 27, 28 members that are mostly they have to join the TMA. There's a few that I go out and actually try to get in new memberships. So we do have a shuttle that is, we have two shuttles, one on two different main corridors in Watertown. And so a few of the initiatives that we're working on, based mostly with the city municipality, the city of Watertown. One is to, there was a mobility study that was just commissioned by the city of Watertown, and the results came back and pretty much told us what we needed to do or affirm what we needed to do. And that was combine these two shuttles so that they could connect and expand the service. So our main focus right now is we've put out an RFP for a shuttle provider where it will be, we will continue with the provider that we have now, or we could potentially, get a new one based on cost and service delivery and things like that. So we're focusing in on that. We should have the RFP should go out by the end of this month. And then we would move forward with bringing in the operational management of one of the shuttles back to the TMA and the city of Watertown. We will co-manage both shuttles. So the mobility study also says, you need to, as well as combining those services, think about expanding them to other transit locations. Currently, they both go into Harvard Square, and the new transit location we're talking about would be Boston Landing. We have had quite a few people to ask us about changing from Harvard Square or expand the service via surveys that were initially sent out as well. So that's probably one of the main focus of things that the TMA and City of Watertown is working on right now. The other one is we were afforded grant dollars to start our transportation demand management program, of which was a small thing that the city of Watertown had done back in 2018 and had tried to do prior to COVID hitting. So with those dollars, we were able to actually put in an actual TDM program. So we kicked that off, and now we got another second grant to expand TDM by promotions, sort of promoting or expanding a bike program, promoting our shuttle service more, collecting that data and finding out what else we can do in the city of Watertown with that data. So we're in the midst of doing that now. And we're just, wanting to see how by promoting alternative vehicles more, alternative options more, will that change the behavior of people coming in, going out of Watertown? So that's basically what we're doing right now. So my little shortened version.
Thank you, Sophia. Yeah, and I think like it's great if people take the approach of going over all their initiatives, their top couple of initiatives, one initiative. Like I know everyone's organizations work on a number of things, so it's hard to take any one item in isolation. But does anyone have any questions for Sophia about their work? Becky?
Hi, Sophia. Just wanted to, just curious, since I'm also in Watertown and I'm part of the transportation committee, or just tune in. And so what ways are you using to promote the
The programs and everything.
programs? Yes.
Okay, so currently, we have a website, but the website is really outdated. The website was designed back in 2018. So one of the initiatives that we're using the funding for is to redesign the website. We are working with Mass DOT on like shelter signage so that we could put information on those shelters in Watertown about the shuttle service. So that's brand new to us. We're also working with Blue Bikes that we can advertise on their shelters as well, or their sidings, side panels as well. We've now started working with the Watertown news so that we can promote more and beefing up our social media.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other questions for Sophia? All right, so then we will move on to the town of Natick.
All right, thanks, Sean. So my name is Morgan. I work as a transportation and economic development planner within the Town of Natick's planning department. And while I'm assisting with several projects, I've decided to share out today specifically on Natick's goal to create a town-wide bicycle and pedestrian network plan. So first, just some quick context. Natick 2030, which is our comprehensive plan, recommends reviewing the existing multimodal network in Natick and developing a town-wide bicycle and pedestrian plan to suggest improvements that will be implemented over time. Sort of following up on that, Natick's net zero plan further recommends that nearly every home and business in town should be accessible by biking, walking, or transit by 2050. Currently, we have approximately 9 miles of bicycle infrastructure out of around 125 miles of roadway here in Natick. So there's definitely a lot of work to be done to realize this goal from the bike side of things. The town's Transportation Advisory Committee, which is a resident-led body that advises the select board on transportation issues, has also called for the creation of a bicycle and pedestrian plan. So there's been kind of a lot of calls to sort of get this done. Today in Natick, bicycle infrastructure and policy are created kind of on an ad hoc or like case-by-case basis. So some current projects include Mass DOT's reconstruction of the Route 27 bridge over Route 9 in North Natick, which will include a shared use path. The Main Street project, which will enhance bicycle and pedestrian mobility along Main Street in Natick Center, the extension of the Constituent Rail Trail into Natick Center, and initial partnerships with Safe Routes to School on bicycle safety classes for kids and regulation around micromobility. So my hope is that a larger bicycle and pedestrian planning process will kind of complement these projects and bring them into a larger whole to allow the town to plan for and develop a strategic, comprehensive, non-vehicular network and policy framework to help us meet our stated goals. So we're still very early on in this process. Current progress to date has included research and review of bicycle and pedestrian plans in several peer municipalities like Framingham, Newton, Lexington, Watertown, Cambridge, and Somerville. We've also done some outreach to the MPO and to MAPC to understand their technical assistance resources. And we've worked on creating a draft scope of work for the project and doing some research on potential funding sources. I've also been doing some engagement with internal stakeholders like town administration, the select board, DPW, the police, And I've also had the capacity and interest, so I've started working on some preliminary existing conditions data collection, including creating an inventory of existing bicycle facilities and parking in Natick, doing some census data collection, and working on a bicycle level of traffic stress analysis for town. So we still have several open questions to resolve before the process officially gets underway. This includes sort of figuring out interdepartmental appetite for this. Still working on getting buy-in from folks in different departments, some of whom have been skeptical about the value of the plan. And I want to make sure that we're all on the same page before we begin any formal planning work. We're also trying to determine if we want to do this work in-house or partner with a consultant. If we partner with a consultant, we'll need to figure out a funding source, so we're definitely looking into that. We also need to still determine our timeline going forward. So that's currently where we are. Definitely happy to take any questions or suggestions from folks if they have any.
Thank you, Morgan. All right, any questions or comments for Morgan on the town of Natick's work in the transportation space?
I might chime in actually, that I just really love what Natick's doing with the constituent pathway and connecting it directly to the commuter rail and making it so that you can have this really intermodal connectivity. And I also really appreciate how there's this regional work that's going to connect up into Framingham. So I think you're really poised at being a center of really just this like great network of kind of what will be both recreational and transportation uses. And the fact that, I have a lot of friends who do work at the MathWorks facilities too, and to note that the pathways development was inspired a lot by the advocacy and funding that came from the business community up in Natick. So I think it's a really good example of kind of the shared opportunities that a new transportation system can bring, and to find the different partners to bring it along the way.
Thank you. Yeah, the Constituent Rail Trail is a great asset. We're very proud of it here, here at Natick.
Thanks, Galen. Any other questions or comments from Morgan? All right, great. We are right on time with our agenda. I think this was a really great first sort of edition of this information sharing and sort of like show and tell section of the agenda. If any of the advisory council members have any feedback on like the prompt or like this concept, I would welcome you to send that to me and Caitlin and Carl so that we can do some modifications or fine tuning before the next meeting. But there will be another group of 4 to 5 members who, well in advance of the next meeting, will be asked to do similar share outs. So we have that to look forward to for the December meeting. Okay, now the next item on our agenda is, could you just advance one, Megan? Thank you. It is a presentation by Tanner Bonner, who is a data analyst on our staff, about a recent study that was completed by the MPO on connections between Blue Bikes and the MBTA. Sorry, Caitlin, I saw that you had your hand raised.
That's okay. I just wanted to thank everyone for their presentations. It's incredibly useful to us, to Carl, Will, and as we go into the meeting, so sort of have a background of what you guys are doing, what is most interest to you, and how we can kind of connect the dots. So thank you so much for your time in preparing those presentations and sharing them out with us. We sincerely appreciate it. It helps our work as well. So thank you.
Definitely. Thank you, Caitlin. All right, now I'm going to hand things off to Tanner for their presentation on the study about Blue Bikes and MBTA connections.
Thanks, Sean. Can everyone hear me okay? Looks like I'm lighting up green, so I think so.
Yes.
Awesome. So hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm Tanner Bonner. As Sean mentioned, I'm a data analyst at the MPO, and I'll be presenting an overview on the Blue Bikes and MBTA connections UPWP discrete study that we recently completed. First, just for some context on what I mean by UPWP discrete study, for those who might be less familiar. So each year for our UPWP, which is our annual planning document, we open up a call for ideas, both internally and externally, on topics that people are interested in seeing the MPO research about that go above and beyond or don't cleanly fit into our program work. These ideas are then evaluated and chosen by the UPWP committee to pursue as discrete studies, usually with a total budget of around $150,000, which typically gets dedicated to about 3 discrete studies or so each year. And what I'm about to present was one of those discrete studies that was funded last federal fiscal year. I will say in many cases, though, when an idea doesn't get funded specifically as a discrete study, we still try to see where it can fit into the research within our program work. So for this study, we use network and trip data to help understand the connection and synergies between the Blue Bikes and MBTA systems. Our final report for this study is an interactive story map format with a supplemental literature review document. I won't be scrolling through the story map here, so if you haven't, I encourage you to take a look at the interactive report so you can dive a bit deeper into the data, and I can drop that link after the presentation in the chat. But without further ado, much of the inspiration for this study came from witnessing the rapid expansion of Blue Bikes over the past few years. And this system's been a positive asset to our region, as bike sharing promotes physical activity, can get people to places faster than walking, it's relatively inexpensive, and it can shift trips away from cars. And another key benefit of a bike sharing system is that it can fill in gaps in the transportation network. A widespread and dense bike sharing system can provide people with multiple options to travel, and it can increase the resiliency of the transportation system as a whole. During transit disruptions, we've seen increases in Blue Bikes ridership and set new records. During the Orange Light shutdown in September 2022, the system saw over 600,000 trips in a month. And the Blue Bike system complements the T during regular service as well. The MPO conducted a survey of Blue Bikes riders back in September 2023 and estimated that up to 10% of users' trips connected to or from an MBTA service during that time. Next slide, please. So understanding the connection and the synergies between these systems can support sustainable growth of the Blue Bikes network and improve travel opportunities and experience for new and existing riders. With existing data sources, we currently do not know precisely how often and where Blue Bikes riders are making connections to MBTA service or using Blue Bikes as an alternative, but we can start to explore network and trip data to begin understanding where these connections have the strongest potential and where gaps remain. So in our analysis, we asked 2 questions. 1, how interconnected are the Blue Bikes and MBTA networks? And 2, how are Blue Bikes trips potentially interacting with the MBTA? Next slide, please. So in our network analysis, we considered Blue Bike stations and MBTA service nearby if their access points were within a 3-minute walk or so of each other. Of the stations we analyzed, we found that more than 80% of Blue Bike stations are near MBTA bus or rail. In the map shown, we can see a sample of Blue Bike stations near MBTA bus or rail in dark blue, and Blue Bike stations that are not near MBTA bus or rail in light blue. Next slide, please. And on the other hand, connectivity from the T differs a bit by mode. Most of the T's rapid transit rail stations have a Blue Bike station nearby, but there's still gaps. About 28% of these stations do not have a Blue Bike station nearby, notably along the Braintree branch of the Red Line, the D and E branches of the Green Line, and the Blue Line, as you can see here. Next slide, please. It is worth noting, though, that some routes are well connected to Blue Bike stations. 11 routes listed here, including 9 bus routes and 2 rapid transit rail routes, have a Blue Bike station near at least 80% of their stops. Next slide, please. But with these strong connections, there's still potential to strengthen these connections between Blue Bikes and the T, where they already exist. Most stops or stations near Blue Bikes only have 1 station nearby. Having multiple Blue Bike stations, especially near high-activity MBTA service, can provide riders multiple options and support more capacity for multimodal trip activity. For example, some rapid transit rail stations have more than 3 Blue Bike stations nearby. Next slide, please. So the other major piece of our analysis involved Blue Bike's trip data, given these network connections. Of all trips in 2024, we found almost 4 million trips that occurred near MBTA bus or rail service, and we classified them into one of 4 categories listed here. potential first mile, potential last mile, supplemental efficient, and supplemental less efficient, which I'll dive more into. Next slide, please. So potential first mile trips did not start near transit, but they ended near transit, represented in the top diagram. And on the flip side, potential last mile trips started near transit, but did not end near transit, represented in the bottom diagram. Next slide, please. On the other hand, supplemental trips both started and ended near transit. And to distinguish these supplemental trips, we simulated the travel times for these trips by biking and alternatively by transit during a typical or optimal service day. And when trips were significantly faster by biking than transit, we classified them as efficient, represented in the top diagram. When trips were similarly as fast or slower by biking than transit, we classified them as less efficient, represented in the bottom diagram. Next slide, please. So across these 4 trip types, we found that overall supplemental trips were the most common. Efficient trips accounted for about 46% of Blue Bike trips near transit, compared to 38% for less efficient trips, while potential first and last mile connections accounted for about 8% of trips each, seen in the chart here. Next slide, please. Looking specifically now at potential first and last mile trips, we found that the share of these trips shifted throughout the day. On weekdays, we found that the share of last mile trips was greatest during the AM peak period, while the share of first mile trips was greatest in the PM peak period. So this might imply that commuters are more likely to use Blue Bikes to make a connection from an MBTA service to work, rather than from an MBTA service to their home location. So in other words, riders may more likely use Blue Bikes as the second leg of their to-work journey in the morning and the first leg of their from-work journey in the afternoon. Next slide, please. And in making connections to or from transit, we find that potential first and last mile trips connect most often to MBTA routes that serve downtown Boston and Cambridge. The top 5 rail connections are the Green Line, B, D, and E branches, the Orange Line, and the Red Line, while the top 5 bus route connections are the 1, 47, 64, 68, and CT2. And Blue Bikes trips that potentially connect to these routes account for about 30% of all potential first and last mile connections. Next slide, please. Moving away from potential first and last mile trips and looking at efficient trips that both started and ended near transit, we analyzed a subset of these trips that started and ended along the same MBTA route. These efficient supplemental trips more often occurred along bus routes compared to rail routes, with the Route 1, 4, 8, 47, and 66 bus routes being the most common potential bus substitutions. For rail, although a bit less common, the B, D, and E branches of the Green Line, the Orange Line, and the Red Line were the most common potential substitutions. And I shall say, although we analyzed simulated travel time differences, many factors beyond travel time differences can influence whether users decide to take transit or use Blue Bikes. Bus crowding could be one of these factors, though only about 1/5 of bus routes overall in the MBTA system had crowding levels above the target standard as of fall 2023. 4 of the 5 bus routes here did. Next slide, please. So putting this trip activity into a larger context, it's important to recognize that the presence of high comfort bikeways that provide physical separation for motor vehicles can help riders feel more comfortable and safe, and can strongly influence bike trip activity on a regional scale. In our analysis, we found most trip activity tended to be near the growing networks of high comfort bikeways between portions of Boston and Cambridge, shown in the map here. Next slide, please. On the other hand, the Blue Bike stations that serve the least potential first or last mile trips are largely separated from high comfort bikeways throughout other portions of Boston and other municipalities. While other factors like land use and population density can influence how often people choose to bike throughout the region, safe and comfortable conditions are critical in encouraging multimodal transportation. Next slide, please. So as the Blue Bikes network continues to grow, we should consider how we can establish more connections between Blue Bikes and the T and facilitate travel by bike and transit together. The proximity of transit service can be considered during station siting, as well as the potential to increase users' ability to access transit stops for areas not near transit. And station siting should also consider sufficient station density and spread to maximize access to the bike sharing network while affording users multiple options to make their trips. And additionally, we found 4 primary components that could influence where stations are sited to optimize bike sharing benefits, which fall under feasibility, demand, equity, and public input. And other system improvements beyond bike share station siting can strengthen a complementary relationship between bike share and transit. Transit and bike share systems can coordinate on fare payment systems, navigation applications, and wayfinding, for example. Next slide, please. So moving forward to fill in these gaps, the MPO could serve to provide technical assistance to municipalities seeking to expand their Blue Bikes network and support strategic collaboration across communities and agencies. The MPO recently has supported the city of Quincy with analysis to identify potential Blue Bikes locations, which has been guided by the station siting research that I recently highlighted. And furthermore, additional data collection could provide more insight into trip-making behavior and identify other growth opportunities. From this study's analysis, we do not know the true starts and ends of Blue Bikes users' trips, nor do we know where and when Blue Bikes users are actually connecting to MBTA service. And lastly, the MPO could research a variety of other topics related to Blue Bikes and transit connections, which, for example, could include developing a model to project future demand and revenue for both biking and transit upon Blue Bike station expansion, or assessing other before and after effects of Blue Bikes expansions, or studying e-bike pattern usage throughout the system. And these sorts of topics could potentially be funded in a future UPWP cycle, for example. And that's my presentation. Thanks for listening, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And I'll drop the link to the story map if it has not yet been shared already.
I just wanted to say this
feel free
is
to,
great.
I was going to say, feel free to facilitate your own Q&A. Go ahead.
Sure.
Sorry, I didn't put my hand up. I'm really impressed. This is a super robust analysis, and I think you did a really nice job with the available data and caveating things and the hypotheses about how and where people use them. It's great. It's really compelling.
Thanks, Jonah. Maha, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that.
No, that's how you pronounce it. I guess my question is, one thing, was there any community interviews engagement for this research? I do see there's like a lot of data sets and everything, but was there any community engagement? And wondering if there wasn't, because why wasn't there any community if there wasn't? Because something that I was looking, like, I mean, data sets are amazing. I love the study. I think this is so helpful, especially for the kind of work that we do. I guess I have some more probing questions for users of both the systems, especially around, like, hate to bring it up, but cost. Because I know within the transit system, we have, like, within an hour, I guess, like, you only pay like the highest amount, which is if you take a train and a bus, you only pay for train. But what does that mean for like Blue Bikes, that even if there are within 3 minutes off your station, is that even a consideration for people? And I guess other than price, being physically next to a transit station, would that change? Like, I see the 3-minute walk, but I also know that Boston's weather and like just would it, like I was wondering if you guys were planning on probing into these questions, or did they come up, or were there any like interviews with like different neighborhoods and their perspective? Because I feel like sometimes when you move from Cambridge to like Dorchester, there's like a huge variety of opinions and perspectives. So wondering if you guys like thought about it, or is something in the future or something.
Yeah, great question and great point. So I will say this study is really like a limited scope sort of exploratory data analysis research study. And I absolutely agree that public input and engagement is really important, especially too in understanding the nuances and the barriers like cost, some of the things we address in our literature review, but that we also look to some of our partners also to engage, especially when thinking about, say, Blue Bike Station siting. I know the city of Boston has done multiple phases across different neighborhoods in its recent Blue Bike Station siting efforts. So while this study wasn't directly engaging with the community, we've met with some municipalities, some TMAs, just to get a better understanding of what's going on in the planning space around blue bikes, just to help the MPO understand a bit more, especially as MAPC has typically been a leader in that space, working with municipalities who then do engagement and so forth. With the city of Quincy, they had a really great data set on input for potential locations that we weighted quite heavily in our model. So we do use data in that sort of way. And I think there's definitely more that we can do. But for this specific study, it was not a key component per se. Wig.
Hi, thanks for this report. It's super interesting, very clear presentation. And first I want to say, I think this is a spectacular success. I thank everybody who worked on it, as well as Blue Cross Blue Shield, who I think provided some funding in the beginning. I have three kind of small questions. The first one is, and I'll just throw them out at once and you can answer whatever way is easiest. Do you track some of the trip details, which you could do anonymously, I think, without paying attention to who was using the bike? I think that's always interesting, what the route choices are. And then secondly, is anybody paying attention to exposure analysis? I've taught a lot of environmental epidemiology and started a transportation exposure environmental epidemiology program that has over 100 papers in the National Library of Medicine. And people don't realize that if you're riding in a bike lane next to a busy roadway, even if you're fit, the net effect on your health is quite damaging. The net effect on your health is not beneficial if you're riding next to a busy roadway. So I just wanted to throw that stuff out there.
Yeah, so with the details that Blue Bikes provides, one thing we don't know is what route that people take. That would be great information for us to have, but unfortunately Blue Bikes doesn't publish it. But they do have other information, such as like the time that they started their trip, for example, whether they used an electric bike or a standard bike, which is an aspect we didn't really dive into much here, but we've heard a lot of interest about. So yeah, there's some other details that we didn't necessarily show the analyses for here, but like route choice, that's not included in the data set. And to your second question, for exposure analysis, not so much in this study, but the MPO will be publishing a dashboard soon that does include the access or the exposure to air quality and the differential of that throughout the region at around like a 200 meter or so resolution, and some statistics about that and different demographics there. So that's something to look forward to. But in terms of like specifically biking exposure, I don't believe that's something that we have conducted much research in.
Yeah, super thanks for that. Just keep in mind that PM 2.5 is not worth studying. The only thing really worth studying is first and foremost exposure to ultrafine particles from transportation. And secondly, to a lesser extent, noise, but ultrafine particles, there is no variation in PM 2.5 over very large areas. It's a regional pollutant, so that one is not worth studying. There's a lot of pretty good groups, and I could always put you in touch with them that do study ultrafine particles. It's much more rigorous science, but that's where the health effects are coming from. But thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I love the overall Blue Bikes effort and the trails and pass effort. Thank you.
Thank you. Morgan.
Yeah, first, just want to echo what other folks have said. This is really cool to look through. I'm looking forward to digging more into this. You mentioned it a bit, but as part of the study, did you speak to either Lyft or the MBTA about the possibility of like integrating, like blue bikes and transit payments as kind of like mobility as a service type thing? And if not, is that something that the MPO is thinking about looking more into in the future?
Yeah, we've definitely had conversations with the T about this. We've done some other research too. We published a study about mobility integrations. I think it was either 2 or 3 years ago. I can't remember at this point. That dived a bit deeper into like fare payment integration, for example. And I know the T has recently published their mobility integrations plan. And so we've started to have some initial conversations about using some of this research and thinking about their plan and coordinating our efforts there. As for the MPO overall, I can't speak too much to what specific work might be coming up around mobility as a service, but I've definitely been hearing it in different places. So it's something that people are talking about.
Thank you.
Elias?
Hi. So first of all, I also want to echo what everyone else has said about like this is really a great and interesting analysis. So I have 2 points that I want to raise here. One is like if we think of this study as from the perspective of what does blue bike usage data inform the MBTA about what services it needs to improve, or whether it's like buses that are made more reliable, or certain connections that may not exist in the network that need to be strengthened, or there is the research in its current state, is it kind of at the point where it is able to inform recommendations for them for the MBTAs? So that's one thing. And another question is I was a little bit surprised about your mention that of the first mile and last mile trips, they are more commonly used between the last station and their workplace rather than between their home and the first station, let's say on their way from home to work. Because I know I think a lot of other countries where bike shares are more commonly used, I think there are often cases where that first mile trip from people's homes to the nearest transit station is actually more commonly used, not the other way around. So I was wondering how much of that has to do with the specific way that Blue Bikes is being operated, or the distribution of Blue Bike stations. Like for example, if we have more stations within deeper into residential areas that are not close to transit, would that improve things and encourage more people to use Blue Bike as their first mode on their way to work?
Yeah, to your first question, slash point, yeah, absolutely. We want this research to be able to like help the T understand what routes could be made maybe more efficient, for example. I think there's a lot of different ways to slice up this data, and we've offered different forms of the data to them as they would like to see it. So absolutely, not just from municipalities or other people might be thinking about this, but definitely the MBTA is a major audience focus for us in this research. And two, yeah, that was also a little surprising to me as well, that that trend there with the AM and PM peak in the first and last mile prominence difference there. And yeah, it could be a lot of different things. We don't really know exactly. We didn't dig too deep into that insight here, but it could be the distribution of stations and how they're related to people's workplaces and how well distributed they are then throughout residential areas. Much more dense in certain places with high activity that are more mixed use, for example. So it's just an initial hypothesis that we put out there, but we haven't done robust analysis of what factors might really be driving that. But it's interesting to see. Mir.
All right. Hi, Tanner. Good to see you again. This is really robust and fantastic research. So, thank you for doing it. I got to look through the ArcGIS story map, and it was great talking to you at different points throughout the development of this project. So it's really cool to kind of see it here at this end where it's able to influence discussions on this blue bikes and micromobility integration. And something that I guess I have like a point and a question. The point is kind of like for MPO conversations for everyone. And then the question is if you guys had thought about this, like kind of as you're doing the research and then kind of coming through with the report, if this idea came up on the data team. But as I was looking at it, you look at a lot of the regional bus routes that you show, and even on some of the transit lines and commuter rail lines, further out from the inner core, there isn't really a lot of connection with blue bikes. And that's something that you go to show. And I think if you're someone who isn't really a transit nerd looking at the maps all the time, you might be amazed to see how many bus routes there are in the region and outside of the inner core as well. And then even just looking at how extensive the commuter rail network is. And then to see, okay, the red line goes to Braintree, and that's far down on the South Shore. I would really say when you have I-93 as a corridor there, it really cuts off any of those communities from other places closer to the inner core. And so when you start looking at these patterns as you move further away, it's no longer a system where, okay, I'm going to ride a bike from where I live in Braintree to where I work in Boston, like it might be if I live in Brookline right now, about 3 or 4 miles away from where I work. So sometimes if, whatever's going on with the T, I'll just hop on a blue bike or on my personal bike and ride to my office. So there you have that option with the blue bike system, and there's a lot of versatility there. But now that we're starting to look more at a regional level, it's almost like the need is to connect to transit to then take you other places if you want a longer kind of trip destination in mind. No, few people are going to want to ride from Quincy to downtown Boston. But if you have a lot of stations in Quincy connecting to the Red Line and the commuter rail and also the bus network, because there's a hub in Quincy Center, that really increases your ability to get to those places without a car. So it's kind of like changing the serve or the purpose of blue bikes. And I was just curious if you guys as a team and looking at this data have been able to think about, like, can we identify multiple different profiles of a blue bike user, what that might look like, and how will that inform the way we think about integrating micromobility into our existing network? Because a lot of towns are going to get excited about having blue bikes, but Quincy or I think Hingham, there's a private blue bike station in Hingham, and like those types of communities are not gonna necessarily have the same type of excitement that maybe Cambridge would have about adding 100 more stations. It maybe they're thinking of connecting with their constituents differently. So I'm just curious, like, what have your team's thoughts been on that? And if not, I hope this is a great time for people in the group to kind of think about, like, okay, what are the types of things that are going to inform connecting micromobility with transit?
That's a great question and great set of points there. I will say in terms of regionally and thinking about different slices of users, we haven't thought about that at that scale, but at least for our work with Quincy so far, we really emphasize how can we create these connections to transit as part of building out that model and informing the types of inputs that we put in. And then also recognizing too that it's not just necessarily plopping a station and trying to get it to connect to transit that's going to get people to actually use blue bikes as a service. And thinking about all the other factors that play a role, like proximity to infrastructure or plans for future infrastructure as just one example. And then there's, of course, the outreach portion of it and community engagement. And there's so many facets to it, especially when you think more regionally too, and how it becomes more about creating a connection than really supplementing service. But I would love to have more conversations about it. And I think we're at a starting point to think more regionally about this as we've been diving a bit more into the blue bikes data, understanding more of what's going on in the blue bike space. So yeah, happy to chat more anytime about this work.
Cool. Thanks for starting that work. I mean, we wouldn't be able to get to this point without having robust analysis. So really, thank you.
Thank you, Tanner. Can whoever is interested in hearing more about BMPO's work on blue bikes and discussing, whether it is the connection between the MBTA system or the blue bike system, could you just throw a +1 in the chat so we can kind of do an informal poll of members of what the interest is in this topic? Because it seems like there's a lot of interest, but it would just be good to capture it. Oh, okay. So we're getting a lot of +1s. No one put multiple +1s in. That's cheating. Okay, I don't see multiples. Okay, great. So yeah, this is definitely a topic that we'll return to, and the MPO is planning to do more work in this space, as Tanner sort of hinted at. I think the exact plans for what that is will depend on our collaborations with Blue Bikes and with the MBTA, but there is certainly more to come. And we don't just have to wait until there's a study that's completed to talk about it too. We can talk about what what your priorities as members of the advisory council are for the Blue Bike system, and then how staff can support explorations of different issues around that to advance those priorities. All right, thank you so much, Tanner. I'm sure based on the level of interest that we got from this, that we will be seeing you again soon. So we have a couple of minutes left in the what we planned for the agenda. So I want to take a few minutes to ask if any Community Advisory Council members have items they want to bring up. This space can be used, it can be used for anything, but often it's like, time sensitive updates, like events coming up, things that, everyone needs to be aware of before the next meeting, which will be in early December. If anyone has any members items, please raise your hand and I will call on you. Pete.
You can see me having mic issues.
Yeah, we can hear you.
On November 17th, we're holding a live panel discussion at the Boston Public Library on autonomous vehicles. It's at noon. The information is on our website. So put it in the chat. So you're all welcome to attend or tune in. It should pop up on the website when you go there. So feel free to reach out with any questions. But there was just a hearing this past week on AVs at the Boston City Council. So if anyone has interest in the impacts of AVs and et cetera, please tune in.
Thank you, Pete. All right, does anyone else have a members item? Okay. Okay, with that, we're going to be like a minute over, which makes me mad, but it's fine. We almost stuck the landing. Sorry, at the next meeting, just to give a preview, we're going to be talking, one of the items in the agenda will be about the Unified Planning Work Program, which is just the annual work plan of the MPO staff and what MPO staff will be prioritizing, studying, how we'll be weighting our resources towards different types of work that we could look at. There's always more work than we can actually support, of course. So we're going to be discussing that and getting more into this group's priorities, just as a preview of the next meeting. Okay, so with that, can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Thank you, Jason. And can I please get a second? Sorry, who is that?
Sorry, Scott Mullen, second.
Scott, okay, thank you. All right, the motion having been made and seconded, we don't need to take a formal roll call, so the meeting is adjourned. We'll be sending out a follow-up for members with the materials from this meeting and also information about the December meeting. All right, thank you all so much.
Thank you.